Welcome back to Mystery and Murder, where we uncover the truth behind headline-making cases, delving into the lives of both the victims and the suspects that fascinate the public. During this episode, we'll share the latest updates on the case of Ellen Greenberg. I say updates because still 14 years later, while in the eyes of the law, Ellen committed suicide by stabbing, her parents have never believed that ruling. You won't find more loving parents than those two, but when it comes to their fight for justice, they are as tough as they come. Now, this is the final episode, and we're going to break down new revelations, hear from legal experts who argue this investigation was gravely mishandled, and take a closer look at Ellen's fiance, the man who claimed to have discovered her mangled body in their kitchen. Where is he now? And what lingering questions still demand answers? In all fairness, I need to say, not the fiance nor anyone else has been named a person of interest or a suspect in this case. That's very troubling to her parents. They want to know if someone murdered their daughter, and of course, if so, who was it? Ever since Ellen was found dead, Josh and Sandy Greenberg have been relentless in their pursuit of the truth. Their journey has been marked by years of pain, frustration, legal battles, and immense personal sacrifice. They've poured huge sums of money investigating Ellen's death, determined to uncover what really happened when the system failed them, and they do believe that it failed them and failed them miserably. To me, these two are just absolute heroes. Their grit reminds me of the late Dominic Dunn, the novelist and crime writer. He once wrote in Vanity Fair about his own daughter, Dominique, who died at the hands of her abusive boyfriend. Dominic described attending every day of her murder trial as essential because someone had meaningfully told him that this was the last business of his daughter's life. For Josh and Sandy, Ellen was their child, and how she died matters. Not just because they love her, but because in their minds there is no doubt Ellen was murdered. So in the years that followed, Sandy and Josh consulted with major experts in the field, and these experts have completely disagreed with original investigative conclusions. All the way back in 2012, Sandy and Josh decided to be their own detectives. They began by hiring renowned forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht. He just passed away last year at the age of 93, and during his lifetime, he was the go-to man in his field. I worked with Dr. Wecht a number of times over the years, and he was one of one, let me tell you. He cut to the chase, and he told it the way he saw it, whether it was what you wanted to hear or not. He was a straight shooter and highly competent. He conducted thousands of autopsies during his career, and he weighed in on major celebrity deaths, including Robert F. Kennedy, Sharon Tate, and Kurt Cobain. He also testified as an expert during the trial for the murder of Rebecca Zahau, a case we covered on my show and on this podcast. Most famously, Wecht criticized the Warren Commission's findings concerning the assassination of John F. Kennedy, claiming that there had been more than one shooter. You get the picture. He was a well-respected professional who didn't shy away from stating his opinions, and he left no stone unturned when it came to his findings. So what did Wecht find in the case of Ellen Greenberg? Well, let's just talk about that in some detail. Of course, he found multiple stab wounds. Dr. Wecht emphasized the unusual nature of the case, noting that Ellen sustained 20 stab wounds, including injuries to her chest, abdomen, and the back of the neck. He highlighted that suicidal stab wounds are rarely multiple, and that stab wounds to the back are particularly uncommon in suicide cases. Lack of defense wounds. The report acknowledged the absence of defense wounds on Ellen's body. However, Dr. Wecht suggested that this does not conclusively indicate suicide, as the absence could be due to a blitz attack, where the victim is overwhelmed quickly and unable to defend herself. Now, with regard to scene investigation, Dr. Wecht raised concerns about the crime scene management, noting that the apartment was cleaned before a thorough forensic examination could be conducted. And you'll remember that we talked about the fact that the very next day, it was released to have a crime scene cleaning crew come in and clean it up. He also pointed out that key items such as Ellen's personal electronics were removed from the scene prematurely, because the very next day, her fiance's uncle and cousin came and took away her purse, her cell phone, and her laptop. So what did Cyril conclude? Well, he concluded that the manner of Ellen Greenberg's death is strongly suspicious of homicide. He recommended a comprehensive reinvestigation, including a thorough review of all forensic evidence and witness statements. Up next, Google searches for a, quote, painless way out, but then a death that's anything but. Something's not adding up. After the break, we're digging into the contradictions that have people seriously questioning the official story. Homeowners, when's the last time you checked on your home title? If your answer is never, then this is for you. Scammers are stealing titles and your equity is the target. Criminals forge your signature, and just like that, your home title can be transferred out of your name. That's why I partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code Phil at HometitleLock.com and you'll get a free title history report. Plus, you'll get a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Phil. Now, I have in front of me just one of the many photos that were put together to represent Ellen's autopsy using 3D computer recreation, a technology that was not available at the time of her death. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and well, this is no exception. What I'm looking at is a visual representation of knives going into the wounds found on Ellen's body. The image also shows a massive gash down the back of her head. It's a haunting, disturbing image, even though it's artificial. It reinforces that the notion of someone stabbing themselves this many times in these hard-to-reach places, well, I'm sorry, but to me it just seems inconceivable. Other discrepancies emerged. Independent pathologist Wayne Ross identified hemorrhaging in Ellen's neck muscles, which he believed pointed to strangulation. He also noted multiple bruises across her body, describing them as consistent with a repeated beating. Wayne Ross further noted that the injuries to Ellen's brain and spinal cord would have resulted in excruciating pain, cranial nerve dysfunction, and significant trauma to her brain. Now, uncovering these new details was not easy. At times, it was like pulling teeth. On my show, I spoke with former Philadelphia prosecutor Guy DeAndre, who was assigned to Ellen's case back in 2015. And he took a deep dive into the investigation, and here's what he had to say. When you asked the medical examiner for information about the stab wounds and all, were they forthcoming with you about all of this?
Not at all, not all the time. It took pushing. And what I mean by that, Dr. Phil, one of the things that sort of rocked me to my core is when I read in Dr. Osborne's the autopsy report, the Dr. Rourke from the University of Pennsylvania, who was used as a neuropathologist because there wasn't one on staff, so it was a per diem, if you will, or an ad hoc. And there was an indication that she did a neuropathological examination of the spinal column. So when I saw that, I said, okay, let me see that report, because she would have produced her own report, right? And then it was, well, we don't have that report. Okay, well, show me the logs that shows she was there to perform it. We don't have those either. Okay, show me the billing statements that show you paid this doctor as you should have for her work. We don't have that. So then I call, Dr. Rourke years and years and years and years ago, and there was no recollection of doing this. And I don't mean I don't remember one way or another. It was a very clear, I didn't do this. And when I would push, how do you have an examination was done in your report when it's clear by every piece of evidence or lack thereof that it wasn't in fact done? And never got a good answer on that. And it bothers me so tremendously to this day that things were just flat out put into a medical examiner's report that are not true, patently false.
And it wasn't just the new autopsy analysis that raised eyebrows. There were even more details that just no longer fit in the puzzle. The knife block in the kitchen was overturned. Did this point to signs of even a brief struggle, as opposed to Ellen grabbing the knife and plunging it into her body multiple times? There was dried blood on Ellen's face, which experts say indicated that Ellen's body had been moved after she died, which contrasts Sam's original story. Now, the reason they said it indicated that her body had been moved is the streaming of the blood across her face would have to have defied gravity in order for it to have run in the direction it was running if her body hadn't been moved. Blood doesn't run uphill and it doesn't run parallel. It follows the line of least resistance, which is gravity. The blood couldn't have streamed the way it did unless her body had been moved. A lot has been made of Ellen's supposed Google searches for things like painless suicide, which her parents claim the FBI further debunked. Regardless, even if Ellen was seeking a pain-free death, a multiple self-inflicted stabbing just doesn't seem like it would have been on her short list. That's just not how you go about a painless suicide. It's also worth noting that Ellen was an incredibly organized and tidy person. According to her friends, this was a woman who loathed even getting dirty. And yet, all of a sudden, she's choosing a suicidal method in such a violent and horribly painful way? It's just psychologically uncharacteristic of her to do such a thing. And while we're on the subject of Ellen allegedly researching suicide, we should discuss the drugs that were found in her system. Now, we know that she had been having mental health issues and that her psychiatrist had switched her from Zoloft and a low dose of Xanax to Ambien and Klonopin, which Ellen claimed had been helping her. The toxicology report noted, however, that Ellen had Ambien, Klonopin, and Xanax in her system at once. Now, these medications do have side effects when taken solo and combined. Xanax, for example, the side effects can cause paranoia or suicidal ideation. It can impair judgment, memory, and coordination, and when paired with other substances, particularly alcohol, can slow breathing and possibly so much that it leads to death. Now, Klonopin has some overlap with Xanax side effects because they can both cause sedation, impaired coordination, fatigue, and slurred speech. Ambien, common side effects can include headache, drowsiness, dizziness. More serious, although rarer symptoms include acting more outgoing or aggressive than usual, agitation, difficulty concentrating, depression that can worsen, some hallucinations, and very rarely can cause a worsening of depression and suicidal thoughts or actions. So it may worsen and cause suicidal thoughts or actions in a small number of people. Now, when you mix Ambien, Klonopin, and Xanax, it can be highly dangerous due to their compounded effects on the central nervous system. And the major risk when you put all these three together is they slow breathing, they slow heart rate, increasing the risk of respiratory failure, coma, or death, especially with alcohol or other depressants. So you get a real slowing of your functioning, extreme drowsiness, confusion, memory loss, loss of coordination, so you can fall and you can make really life-threatening decisions. So mixing all of these drugs is just not a good idea, and you can't rule out the fact that it could have had some impact on the situation, and suicidal ideation and actions can be a side effect. So bottom line, while Ellen was obviously seeking relief for her anxiety, this was not the safest way to go about it. However, you have to think about it this way. The medical professionals the Greenbergs hired to review Ellen's autopsy did not think that these combined prescriptions caused Ellen to go into a self-stabbing frenzy one snowy day after teaching at school. In fact, the more you go back in time and re-examine the day of Ellen's death, the idea that Ellen would take her own life becomes more and more doubtful. Reopening a case isn't just about asking nicely, it means proving the system missed something big. And let's be real, that's not an easy sell. But coming up, we'll look at why some people believe this case deserves a second look. Introducing Beam's Dream Powder. Proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values of hard work. It's a science-backed nighttime blend shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up ready to tackle the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all-natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. Beam has improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people wake up and feel their best. Beam is giving the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil. Use code Dr. Phil at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil and use code Dr. Phil for up to 40% off. Support an American company and get your best sleep tonight. As you may recall, the only way in or out of Ellen and Sam's sixth-floor apartment was through the front door. Sam said he had to break in because the door was latched from the inside, which supported his assertion that Ellen must have stabbed herself. However, the building manager told CNN that the latched door didn't necessarily mean Ellen had locked herself in. She explained that it was entirely possible for the latch to swing shut on its own as the door closed. She knew this because this was something she had personally experienced in that very building. Furthermore, during our sit-down, Prosecutor Guy DeAndre said it was pretty much laughable that this door latch theory had been given so much credence. Here's what he said.
Within 30 seconds, you can go online, search how to lock or unlock that type of mechanism from outside the apartment. So right away, it just threw me that people with these actual photographs were trying to sell me on a bill of goods that's laughable in a 30-second search. A junior detective could have done that.
And this is easy to open, is what you're saying.
Incredibly easy. You could do it by using a hammer, a device, opening the door too quickly and then slamming it shut. There's so many different ways to do what someone could do inside the apartment and then stage it as being latched from the outside while you're outside.
In addition, a security guard said he had not been there when the fiancé forced open the door. He did not witness this happen, contrary to previous reports. And despite Sam's claim that he had been on the phone with his uncle and cousin when he opened the door, future analysis of phone records and other evidence seemed to contradict that claim. Mind you, the Greenbergs are a very sophisticated and intelligent couple. They knew they couldn't count on the police to be their allies. They knew that the odds were against them and that they would have to fight like hell and be incredibly thorough if they wanted a chance at a new investigation. That's why they hired these specialists. Despite this, requests to reopen the case were just brushed aside. Now, reasons for difficulties of reopening closed cases, as strange as it seems, you're asking people that have made a decision and made a ruling to second guess themselves. You're asking them to say, well, we made a mistake. And nobody wants to do that, especially publicly. That's a very difficult thing to ask a court to do or any public official to do, to go public and say, hey, just wanted to come out and say we're reopening this case because we screwed up. We may have made a really big mistake here. Now, even with the Greenbergs' tenacity, this did in fact prove to be a long and arduous road. Here's why it's often such a challenge having these things overturned. You have to bring something that is really strong. There's a tremendously high burden of proof to open a case. The party requesting it must typically demonstrate compelling reasons, like newly discovered evidence that could significantly change the outcome of the case. And that can be a really high bar to meet because, as I said, you're getting people to say they missed something. You found it, they didn't, and that can be embarrassing. The courts and investigations aim to provide finality, meaning once a case is closed, it should be considered closed, settled, to avoid endless speculation or open themselves up to litigation. Think about it this way. Whenever there's a killer on the loose, the pressure is on the police to catch the perp, not only, of course, to protect the public, but also because there's an image. It's their job to solve crimes, to catch the bad guy. It's not a good look to have a case go unsolved. And so there's always a tendency to try to get to a finding. And then there are procedural hurdles. Reopening a case often involves specific legal procedures and deadlines, like statute of limitations or whatever, that must be followed, adding complexity to the process. And fortunately, that wasn't a big problem here. The statute of limitations didn't figure into it. And then there's always time and cost. I mean, they've spent money on this, they've done autopsies, they've had investigators work on this, they've done the paperwork, they've filed everything. And to reopen it can be time-consuming and very expensive, and it can require manpower and court hearings, and they have their current cases. So to reach back 14, 15 years and bring something up to put it on top of everything they have to do today, the everyday common sense of it is just, they're just not thrilled to do that. Of course, the focus should be on justice, but it just doesn't burn so hot when it's an older case. And by 2019, the Greenbergs had reached their breaking point. In October of that year, they filed a civil lawsuit against the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office and the medical examiner, Marlon Osborne. Their goal was to have Ellen's manner of death changed to either homicide or at least undetermined, citing newly uncovered evidence and Osborne's own admission that he altered the ruling under pressure from law enforcement. But even with these small steps forward, the case continued to stall, with prosecutors concluding there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges. So in February of 22, the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, led by Josh Shapiro, now governor, reaffirmed Ellen's death as a suicide, a decision that drew sharp criticism from the Greenbergs and remains painful for them to this day. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, the tide turned, at least somewhat. In August of 22, the Chester County District Attorney's Office announced it would reopen the investigation into Ellen Greenberg's death, just weeks after the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office relinquished the case, citing an appearance of conflict of interest. Well, momentum continued to build, and in July of 24, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania granted a petition for allowance of appeal, agreeing to review challenges to Ellen's official cause of death. In February of 25, a settlement for the Greenbergs was reached, ensuring that Ellen's case would be reinvestigated. The medical examiner, Marlon Osborne, who now lives in Florida, even submitted a sworn statement declaring that, after reviewing new evidence, he no longer stood by his ruling of suicide. Now get this. We're now talking years and years later, after all the resistance, all the pushback, all of the denials, that original medical examiner says, yeah, I no longer stand by my original ruling. The Greenbergs also reached a settlement after pursuing damages alleging a conspiracy to cover up Ellen's murder. So, the fight for Ellen is not over, not by a long shot. But strides are being made. Now, this brings me back to Ellen's fiance, Sam Goldberg. What's been going on with him? Today, he's married and appears, at least from a Google search, to be doing well. I read a statement that Sam recently provided and got the Greenbergs' reaction during our taping. Ellen's fiance, Sam Goldberg, recently spoke, telling CNN in an email statement, and I quote, "When Ellen took her own life, it left me bewildered. She was a wonderful and kind person who had everything to live for. When she died, a part of me died with her. Unimaginably, in the years that have passed, I have had to endure the unimaginable passing of my future wife and the pathetic and despicable attempts to desecrate my reputation and her privacy by creating a narrative that embraces lies, distortions, and falsehoods in order to avoid the truth. Mental illness is very real and has many victims. I hope and pray that you never lose someone you love like I did to a terrible disease, and then be accused by ignorant and misinformed people of causing her death. If you're really writing a truthful story, dig deeper, and please do some good by raising awareness for mental health. End of quote. We reached out to Sam through his attorney and did not hear back. Joshua, Sandy, any response to that statement?
I have no comment.
I do. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. There's not an ounce of truth in it. We have for 14 or whatever the time is, 14 years here, never pointed a finger at who we thought did this or any way, shape, or form. So I have no idea what he's talking about. We have done this by the book. No jumping on tables, no acting out like a moron or an idiot, no excited father or mother. We have done this professionally. And we never have ever said who we thought might have been the person that actually murdered Ellen. But we do believe she was a victim of a homicide, a murder, a savage and brutal murder.
So you have no doubt in your mind that she is the victim of foul play, that she was murdered here, and lots of signs point to that. You're not saying that it was him. You're not suggesting it was him. You're just saying someone took your daughter's life. You believe that to the core of your soul.
I believe there was a murderer and a female abuser loose in Philadelphia or someplace comparable that was involved in this particular incident. That's what I believe.
So what is it these parents are after, and why is it so important to them? Well, they just want answers. They admit they don't know the identity of Ellen's alleged killer, but they fervently believe that she was murdered, and they cannot and will not rest until they find out who did it. I know you want justice. You also want the truth to come out. Sandy, why is this so important to you after 14 years?
Well, I've always felt that I wanted to clear Ellen's name. It just on principle, she deserves that. She was a resident of Philadelphia. She paid taxes. She was a human life. She was our daughter, but she could be, your daughter, God forbid, or your sister or your aunt or, someone. We've had to tease through 14 years of lies and being held back, dodged at every angle through the politics in Pennsylvania. And I want to get to the bottom of it. And I think at this point, there are a lot more eyes and ears listening and watching. And Ellen just deserves justice. And I'm not going away. In fact, I feel that whoever's controlling the strings in this investigation picked the wrong parents.
Joshua, why is this so important to you?
I was brought up a certain way. I was brought up to do the right thing. Our struggle, our mission, my mission and my wife's, to find out the truth about our daughter's death is a mission. I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. And I couldn't walk away. There were times when money was involved and I couldn't walk away. This is the right thing to do when you lose a daughter like we did, to find out what happened, why it happened, who happened it. Right now, all we're trying to do is to tip the destiny would change to undecided or homicide. It's the right thing to do. And I was the guy in high school who drove everyone home when they were drunk. I did things like that. I don't know if that means anything to you. If you guys understand what I'm saying, but it was my responsibility to make sure everyone got home. So I didn't drink, but I do the right thing. I don't lie. I don't cheat. I do the right thing. And it was my daughter, our daughter, that I was fighting for, that I had a mission to find out what's going on. It was the way I was brought up.
Like I told the Greenbergs when I met them, you just couldn't meet a more noble, forthright set of parents who just want to do right by their daughter. It's impossible not to admire their resolve in the face of such grief and adversity. It's been a living hell for them. And that makes me think of all the other parents and families who are impacted by the murder of someone they love. When you think about the impact on a family in this situation, you have to first think about what causes stress in people's life. Sure enough, the number one stressor is loss of a loved one. And if you start breaking that down within that category, the number one stressor within that category is to lose a child, because it's not the normal thing, right? Children are supposed to bury their parents. Parents are not supposed to bury their children. That's not the cycle of life. So losing a child is at the top of the list. It breaks down even further. Losing a child suddenly, as opposed to a long, protracted illness, tops the list. Losing a child suddenly and violently is at the tip top of the list. So when you're looking at what can put the most demand on parents, they have the tip-top number one stressor in their life. So the emotional distress, the unsettledness of it, the anxiety, the depression, the self-recrimination, all the things that they go through about what if I had done A instead of B? What if I had seen this that I didn't see? What if I had done anything, something to alter what happened? They play the what if game, which can drive them insane. And when things are unsettled and they go through anger and rage and the feelings of isolation and loneliness, all the replaying this in their head, the flashbacks and nightmares and intrusive thoughts and sleep disturbances and everything that you go through when you're emotionally in turmoil, it just stacks up on you. It adds up. Probably the worst thing is you can never start through the grief process because you're not finished processing the death. Was this a suicide? Was it a murder? If it was a murder, no one's been held to account, so there's no justice for your daughter. That person is still walking around as far as you know. Maybe they're in prison somewhere. Maybe they've been killed. Maybe they're living a great life and she's gone. So they're still hung up on the death and the fight for justice, so they never have the peace or opportunity to start grieving the loss and forming a new relationship with their daughter because they don't feel like they've done what they need to do for her. So they're still hung up and have never had the opportunity to properly grieve their daughter because everything is on hold. At least now there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The Greenbergs have been legally assured that Ellen's case will be reopened, and they're determined to hold the state of Pennsylvania accountable. They're pushing for swift action. They need the public support to ensure justice is finally served. They certainly have mine, but it hasn't happened yet. They've been told it's going to happen. They believe it's going to happen, but it still is in process. I hope and pray that one day soon, they're going to get the call and say, hey, listen, it's happening. The case has been reopened. Investigators have been assigned. We're ready to move forward. I truly hope and pray that that's going to take place, but it really hasn't yet. They've got promises, but it hasn't really happened yet. I want this family to find resolution and peace they so deeply deserve. Ellen Greenberg lost her life on a snowy day in 2011 at just 27 years old. She never got to walk down the aisle at her wedding. She never celebrated her 30th birthday. The countless milestones and memories stolen from her are absolutely immeasurable. But what remains forever is the impact she had on those who loved her and continue to love her and fight for her to this day. You've heard all the evidence that we've talked about here, and you can make up your own mind about whether this was a suicide or whether this was a murder. And if it was a murder, who it might have been. That's up to you. I leave those conclusions to you. There has been no person of interest named. There's been no suspect named. And I certainly don't endeavor to name one here. But if this is reopened, as promised, by someone objective, I hope they will look at all of the evidence, even though the crime scene was spoiled, and investigate this with the vigor and commitment that it deserves, as if it had happened yesterday, as if it was their own daughter that was lost. And I certainly support Josh and Sandy in pursuing answers. Thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Phil, and this was Mystery and Murder, analysis by Dr. Phil. Hey, Dr. Phil here. My network, Merit TV, has it all.
Now, let me blow your mind.
Merit TV's got the news that matters.
The selection of a new pope.
Entertainment you crave.
Busted.
Everybody in a good mood today?
And live events.
Surprise.
What am I, chopped liver?
With serious punch.
Big shot.
Go to merittv.com and download the Merit TV app today.